Hey guys, so today you and I are going to talk about over-engineering and when you know that you are over-engineering. So let's get into it. This is an excellent question. And the short answer is you don't know, pretty much. Well, at least not in the beginning of things. In the beginning of things, you will be in what I call one of the stages, and it's only in my world, really in the final stage of your development as a software engineer or a software developer, where you will realize that you are over-engineering something. So the first stage is usually the junior stage, where you start out just trying to get something right. And in that stage, most of what you're doing is that you're trying your best to just get this whole coding thing. You're trying to go from absolute beginner, you don't know anything about coding, checking out every single thing, and to a point where you can actually produce something that is working, sort of right. That's where most people start. And then the second stage is the philosopher stage. This is when you have gotten to a point where you're now fairly confident in your coding skills. You do have, of course, some stuff that you know, everybody needs to look up things, right? But you're at the point where you feel very confident in just being able to write a program of some sort. And this is where you're going to start thinking about best practices. You're going to start thinking about, can we do this better? Can I do this better? This is a better style of working. Is this style better than working? And honest to God, I will even go as far as to say that the vast majority of people stay quite long in this stage. And this is like the root cause as to why you have so many different libraries that do goddamn near the same thing. Because there's so many people who think that their way is going to be a smarter way of doing something. This is usually where over-engineering happens. This is where that's the spot where this is the most common, and it is also the spot where it's very, very unlikely that you will figure out that you are over-engineering something. And the reason is actually quite simple. Because when you're in that stage, you have forgotten, well, rather you haven't learned the beauty and the purpose of what it is that you do. Not for real. You may think that you know, and I like to say that there is a big difference between logically understanding a concept and feeling it, really having it. It's sort of the difference between being informed or intelligent versus being wise. Wisdom comes not just from having the information embedded into your head and spine, but also feeling it at an emotional level and understanding the truth behind the words or the knowledge that you have. And you don't have that when you're in the philosopher stage usually, because it basically comes down to that you're more focused on your perspective on solving the problem. It is sort of how you can imagine an athlete who starts out innocent as a kid, who plays a sport just for the fun of it. Like when you're a kid, you're just playing sports because it's fun. You really, really love it. And then you get a little bit better and you have some things happening in your life that falls into place just so. And before you know it, you are in the minor leagues, and then you go into becoming a pro. And somewhere along the way, all that happiness and joy that you had as a kid gets traded in for prestige, success, pressure, stress, anxieties, and so forth. The sport never changed. It's just that the athlete's perspective and their way of interacting within that sport has changed. So for them, it became, in this case, it becomes a negative thing in many cases, but a very similar thing happens to you as a programmer. You get into a different headspace, if that makes sense. You start thinking about code for the sake of code. You forget the purpose of why you are writing code. You're now more focused on solving these problems, right? And there is really no way, in my opinion, for you to break this, because it's a thought process that you have yourself. I have a very crude saying that I've been saying since I was a teenager, and I say that an idiot needs to be told that they're an idiot, because otherwise they will never change. And the heart and soul of that saying, although it might be a little bit crude, is basically that if you have a world view of how something should work, there is no way for you to just change that. You cannot just by yourself, without any type of influence from an external source, figure out that your way of thinking is incorrect. And the way that you figure this out is through failure. It is, once again, similar to how a child learns something. The child who has never learned to not play with matches needs to burn down the house before they realize that this is really, really bad. Well, hopefully you can stop them before they burn down the whole house, but they need to feel the consequences of their actions. If they never feel those consequences, they will grow up to be spoiled, horrible people when they get to be a little bit older. This is the same thing here. This is how you graduate from the philosopher to becoming the master programmer, or another favorite term that I have for this is the pragmatic master. And this happens through basically partly, I would say, it's partly that you learn through mistakes, because you will over-engineer stuff and you will realize that, damn, a lot of the technical solutions that you provide are going to be, I mean, they're gonna kind of do what you want, but most of the time either a feature doesn't actually get used, like you built it, but nobody really cares. Or you realize that and this is very tough for some people, this is a tough pill for someone who created something to swallow. You realize that your technical genius solution solved this tiny little problem, but causes this amount of overhead to the work process and slows everybody down, and there's problems and new feature requests that just makes the whole thing a big blob of horrible mess. You took this thing that was very simple and made it into this big awful thing that nobody really likes to interact with. And quite a lot of people get very defensive in this situation. They kind of try to remember, because they're philosophers. Like I mean, this is not about making people productive, right? Not in their head. It's about them creating a cool solution that makes them feel mentally satisfied about the work that they do. When you do this enough, you finally realize, and partly, as I said, it's this, but it's also listening to senior experience. And you will, for sometimes, of course, and quite often, ignore the experienced developers who have been doing this for 30 years. You will dismiss some of them as being conservative or old farts, and they're just negative and they're not innovative. And the reality is that sometimes that is true. Let's be honest here, but it's also, in a way, you dismissing people because you don't think that what they know is relevant to what you are doing today. You think that they're outdated. The reality is that quite a few of my absolute favorite philosophies around software development is well over 15 years old. Some of these principles, like functional programming, domain-driven design, so forth, they have existed for many years. It's just that the younger generation thinks that they reinvent it every single time. But the reality is that it hasn't changed all that much. Some parts have, but most of it is really old knowledge. So you will dismiss quite a lot of this. And then finally you will arrive at the pragmatic master stage when you have fucked up enough, when you have started to feel the pain. I found that pain partly because as I was saying, like I listened to more experienced people. I dismissed a lot of what they said. And then I tried things out, and then it became complicated, and I felt the pain from my own work. And then I started, and this was a big one, I started feeling the pain of other people's work when they were trying to be genius about something, and I felt like, this is bullshit, they're fucking up my entire workflow just because they want to do this cool thing. And then the penny dropped, and I realized that, shit, this is what I'm doing as well. And then my mind shifted towards, all right, maybe code isn't about code. Maybe it's not about creating a genius solution just for the sake of creating a genius solution. Maybe it's about trying to create the simplest possible thing that I can do in order to solve the problem, so that productivity goes up, stability increases, and I reduce churn rate. In other words, the pain of interacting with my solution. When I started focusing on these things, as much as I humanly could, like completely, like this was the most important thing to me. I felt that my results, like I became more able to actually produce results and solutions that were elegant. They weren't clever, because what's the value in being clever unless it's actually all these other things at the same time? So what I want you to take away from this is that there is no way for you, if you are in that philosopher stage, to check yourself if you're over-engineering something, because you need the experience to take that step back, or you need someone else to help you. To go back and just ask that fundamental question. Have I overcomplicated this? Is there a simpler solution here? Can I slice something away? A good saying for when something is perfect is when there's no longer anything else to remove from the thing that you're looking at. That is a very good example of the mindset that you should have. And there's a sweet spot to this as well, because there's a difference between simplifying things to the point where they're perfect and making a really shitty implementation just because you want to hack it together because you're stressed. So this is what you should focus on. You know that you have over-engineered something when you present your solution to somebody else and ask them for their honest opinion. Because you should always do that. You should always show somebody else, ideally someone who has a different perspective than you, and ask, is this a good solution? Could I make this simpler? Before you indulge yourself to the point where you're more excited about you solving this problem in the way that you wanted to, like the code that you are writing, as opposed to actually producing something that creates value and stability and so forth for whatever project that you are working on. Have a great day.